So I'm very pleased that Steve Handy, who is the bill's author, could join us online this morning. And Bill, you're Steve sponsoring the bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know things are crazy on Capitol Hill. Thank you for taking time to join us. Several of
Yeah.
our
You bet.
texters have said this sounds like a warm and fuzzy that won't do anything and is too complicated. How do you respond to those comments, Steve?
Well, what I respond to that is that we're not reinventing a wheel here. There are already 5 states, 6 states that have these. They're kind of lumped as red flag laws. They already have them, and there are 19 other states currently, including Florida, who didn't have this in place, who are the legislatures are looking at them. So we're kind of patterning what we're bringing before other legislators after the Indiana law, who's been around for a few years. And so, I totally recognize, Doug. I've heard you talk about you're a gun owner. I'm a gun owner, but no one thinks that a person like Cruz in Florida should. Everyone wants a way to stop a guy like that from doing what he did.
How would this work as you envision it, Steve? What would actually happen? What would the process be? How long would it take?
Thank you. There's two processes that are contemplated in the bill. One is a petition process, and it outlines, a person who that person could be. That let's just call the guy Joe. Joe is not just mentally ill. Joe is in a mental crisis, they believe, and so they bring a petition to the courts. The courts, they have to sign, just like in a protective order, they have to sign a document that lets them clearly understand that they're subject to felony prosecution if the false claim is brought. So there's a high standard here, and then it's under levels of due process where a judge makes that determination, and if clear and convincing evidence, and if granted, then there is the process where law enforcement visits Joe and says, "Hey, Joe, we got a problem here," and then it's a 20-day cooling off period. There has to be a hearing within 20 days. So that's one process. The second one is a more exigent, a more urgent situation where a law enforcement officer who's had interaction with a Joe could then approach a judge under due process, but obtain a quicker warrant for the removal of the firearms. And then there is then a hearing is held within 20 days, to review it.
Removing the firearms, how do we know if we get them all? Is it just...
We don't know.
Yeah.
No, we don't know. We would never know that. We'd never know that. So I just think that what other states are saying too, this could be a piece of the puzzle to these things. Hopefully it's rarely used, if ever used. California last year, they had 86 of these. I think they have one of these provisions, 86 of them, and but they have 37.5 million people in California, Doug.
Right. As far as the time frame and the people that could do this in the first scenario, the second is law enforcement, but the first, who can actually do this regarding Joe or me or you?
Yeah. Well, it could be a family member who would live there within 6 months. It's not just the neighbor down the street who hears that Joe is in trouble. It can be a parent, sibling, spouse, child of the individual, family member who's resided with the respondent within 6 months. So it's fairly narrowly described.
Yeah. One of my questions
has intimate knowledge of Joe.
Sure. One of my questions you already answered because I was concerned. We get people who may have issues themselves, who all of a sudden just want to cause grief for you or me or for Joe. So it's a felony charge if it's a false claim.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think that's important. What's the appetite on Capitol Hill for this, Steve?
Well, we're going to find out here in another hour when I go in front of the committee, and we're going to have a discussion. But I think legislators want to discuss this, whether with 4 days remaining in the session, as you well know, this is something that is ready for prime time. At least we're going to have the discussion, and there's nothing wrong with talking about it, as you know.
The governor is a big believer in the laboratories of democracy and having
Yes,
states do things rather than have
yes,
things happen nationally. Is
right.
do you believe he would be inclined to sign this if it passes?
I've had no conversation there. I've had no input, no anything. I don't know. I
So,
don't know.
boy, with only 4 days, where is this
Yeah,
now in the process? Because normally we're talking committee, we're talking House,
right.
then to the
No, it's going
Senate.
to a committee. It's going to a committee today, and if the committee says, Steve, yeah, we want you to continue to discuss it. I'm sure there'll be changes in what's happening. The fellows from the gun lobby are sitting in my office right now, and they're expressing some concerns. And we could do that, and it's got to go through the House floor and the Senate. And so, I don't want to rush anything. I want to be deliberate about it, but we'll kind of see, Doug.
Is anything resonating in some of the concerns the gun lobbyists are talking about, or those with a
They just
differing
want to they
point?
want to make sure that look the gun lobbyists want to make sure that there are a clearly delineated, very well stated standard of due process.
Yeah, that seems to be what our listeners and our
Yeah,
texters
sure,
are particularly concerned about as well.
right,
Steve, we'll
sure.
watch this with great interest.
Thank you, Doug.
When do you anticipate it'll be before the committee today?
Well, 10 o'clock in a half hour. I'm first on the docket in the House Judiciary.
Boy, we'll be most interested to see how that fares. So, Steve, thank you for taking time out of your schedule here to join us. Steve, do we have you there? Oh, he's gone. He's in a hurry to get to some of the folks that he needs to chat with.